Okay, so this is kind of a continuation of the previous two ago videos or whatever. The jokey one I made in the middle because I kept trying to record the thing and it kept not recording and blah blah blah. And my take two of the hammer version was probably the good one, but you ended up with take three if you're one of the three people who watched the last one. Anyway, in a previous video, I had said, everything that happened in Spinal Tap happened to me. Haha, not entirely true, but close enough. But then this, and then I had talked about you have to be kind of OCD to play music, I guess. And this is kind of a continuation of that thought. But then after that, I'm going to talk more about lessons and other things. So obviously, most bands get sick of playing their songs after years, but not just merely weeks for some groups. If you've seen like That Thing You Do, where you're almost sick of that song by the end of the movie, right? Well, imagine how they felt, playing it night after night, right, for weeks on end. That's kind of the life of a band, but when we progress as musicians, we want to maybe play more complex things, not just always be playing the same simple things. I had when I was in my band after a year or two, it felt like, okay, these songs are kind of stale for me. Should we be doing, different ones or better ones or something? And, the other guys would be like, oh, but then we'll have to write more music. Well, that's kind of your job. You're supposed to keep writing more music, hopefully better music, even if there's not anything wrong with the current, list. And it's kind of funny because one of the songs I remember, I don't know the exact riff, I don't know the notes or whatever, or the chords. So I can't say if it's exactly, but I was kind of like, yeah, but we're past these songs. They don't necessarily fit with our set anymore, that kind of thing. And one of them, they were really like, but you like this song? It's like, yeah, I know, but And it was summer, and in summer, in those days, you didn't have a lot of networking because there was no social media, and the schools were out, and the kids weren't hanging out the same way on the weekends, so we weren't getting a lot of people to come to shows in summer anyway. So it was kind of like that dead zone where you're all kind of sick of each other, but you're still rehearsing. So it was a good time to write new music or whatever. And so if a few years later, though, we had dropped the song, obviously, and probably the other guys forgot all about it, and for a while, and then a few years later, though, there was a Metallica song on the radio, and I was like, doesn't that sound like the same one that we used to do that I thought wasn't good enough? I thought it was kind of subpar for Metallica too, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of funny that you never know what kind of simple riff will become the popular one. But I mean, I don't know if the guys who wrote Louie Louie, got sick of playing Louie Louie. I'm sure they looked back on it more as a fond thing from their youth, but of course the kind of simple Louie Louie songs that were popular kind of got phased out in 1965 or whatever, and everything got kind of more complex after that anyway, not literally, but there was kind I don't know, yeah. I mean, you had simple music in the 70s. Like, I have friends who can't understand why I like the Eagles, but whatever. I don't, but I don't like progressive metal, and they do. So there you go. And I don't know. I mean, I don't want to go down a genre thing and try and divide it by genres. A lot of times when I get students, they're very focused. They only want to learn, Metallica or something, very specific, and it's kind of like, okay, no, but we still have to learn this first, and that can really, bum them out. I've had a lot, more adversarial drum students as time went on, but the first one was contentious because his parents were forcing him to learn the drums, before he could learn the guitar. So I was kind of pulling him by the nose for a couple of years until they fired me so he could go on to his instrument of choice because they figured he was good enough to earn a guitar or however that worked. I mean, so it was kind of like it wasn't just you have to learn these drum parts before you can learn these parts. It was you have to learn this whole instrument before you can learn this. So, but my next student he was a little older, and I think, and he was at an age where I think he thought everything was a power play, and he had to like prove to himself that he was smarter than I was or something. Um, and they both had this in common where they would master some kind of tricky thing, but their timing was still lousy, or not consistent. And they'd get bored and resentful when I'd make them come back and play some like long redundant thing, for a couple weeks in a row. It's like, sorry, but before you go on to the Metallica, you have to master the Eagles. I I teach a lot by playing along with music because that's kind of the way I learned, and I just make it easier for you because I weed out all the songs that you won't be able to do yet. So again, there might be some song that has a bunch of tricky bits and you can memorize that song, but unless you join a group that only plays that song, and I've had gigs like that too. I had one where the gal, the only jazz song she knew was "Girl from Ipanema," so we ended up playing it 2 or 3 times because there was not a lot of people there, just for her. We're just kind of like, okay, we'll do it again, but you have to listen to this other stuff first. Um, so yeah, I mean, yeah, 2 great songs that I always teach pretty much everybody is "Lion Eyes" and "Hotel California," the easy guitar version that is in the wrong key. I don't know if you can still find if that's harder to find on the internet now than in the book. And of course, they notice it's the wrong key when they're trying to play along with the song, and there's only 1 or 2 correct chords that match up, and they're in the wrong spot. But now I think it's easier to kind of copy the chords off the internet without having to include all the piano notes and stuff. Uh, and really, on Hotel California, you only need to know kind of verse 1 because the chorus only repeats twice, and then there's that little kind of break with the mirrors on the ceiling and all that. So when they when they go to play it live later, they'll probably remember the wrong version unless you really really um, learn how to do the right version, and don't get it all mixed up from memory like I do with a lot of songs. Because I get so used to learning the beginner version that when I go on to kind of a more intermediary, it's kind of like, oh, I got to relearn the song too. But that's a good song that really bridges the gap before they're ready for bar chords, though. If they can kind of play that easy version of Hotel California, they can pretty much play all the first position chords. And so, free tip for all you aspiring guitar teachers out there or aspiring guitarists who happen to be watching this and going, what song should I learn? That one. Yeah, I was often surprised to see so much ego in aspiring drummers. I'm sort of used to it from singers and guitarists, I guess, but the drummer is mostly supposed to hang with the bass player, right? I wasn't too sad to see some of those students go in retrospect. Although I'm not sure what I could have done differently to teach them what they think or thought I was withholding that they should know at their skill level then. I mean, some of them wanted to learn how to read music. Most of them didn't. I kind of try to teach them a little bit. Drum music isn't that hard to pick up. It's a lot of slashes and dashes for many, many measures. And if you're playing rock or blues, you're not reading music in a performance setting typically anyway. So you can't really approach it the same way as classical music. So I think sometimes their parents, even though they said they wanted them to learn rock, then they had a classical, like, why aren't you teaching them this mindset? Blah, blah, blah. Like I said, a lot of times if it was the kid who wanted the lesson, they wanted something specific. Like I had a kid one time who said, I want to learn electric guitar. Like there was some big difference between acoustic and electric guitar. And no, it's pretty much the same chords. The neck's a little easier to play, but the strumming and the strings and all that's the same. What he meant was lead guitar. He wanted to be Slash or whatever. He didn't want to feel like the guy in the back or something, whatever that was in his head from watching. In those days, you still had music videos, I think, kind of influencing your. That guy seems to be the guy, not that guy. However. But if there may be many aspiring drummers, watching this, and you can take heart, maybe that Metallica has a drummer who gets a lot of say in his band, and some have argued that he has too much pull, but the others were being flakes in their personal lives or whatever, and their troubles gave him some leverage, maybe. But at that same time, you really have to be a good drummer before you can kind of stand up to your guitar player. They or even if you were great, most people are not going to a concert to see an all drum show. It's part of the music and the experience. They haven't replaced us all with drum machines yet. Even if the threat of the 80s is kind of coming true more and more with home recordings and them programming their computer sounds and all that. But anyway, I have some notes here. Let's see. One problem is there is no real intermediary sized guitar for between a 6-year-old and a 12-year-old. That's true. Yeah, that's something I've noticed is kind of a nuisance when I'm trying to teach like a 10-year-old. The guitar's kind of too big still. The Gallic Guitar Center, said just start them off on the adult size instrument and don't worry about it. But I think they still kind of resent the idea that the neck is 5 feet too long for their arms, and they kind of might give resistance about the weight of the body if it's an electric guitar. Kids, they're not always just fickle to be fickle. Sometimes they have a legitimate complaint, and you have to work around that. Again, more note to the teacher than the student here. Aspiring. I personally would rather not have any students under the age of 10, just because they don't tend to have the attention spans or there's other issues. Like I said, if their parents are forcing them to do this, then it's a struggle from the get-go. But once you get past that first 2 or 3 weeks and they start to see that they can really, okay, I can do this, I can play songs if I just focus, it's usually not terrible. If they are going to put in the practice time, and if their parents are going to force them to practice, then they're going to automatically put in some practice time. But let's see, a lot of times parents get the sticker shock, and so if you're the student and you're really trying to get your parents into financing your equipment or whatever, it's not always the guitar cost. A lot of times it's the add-ons, because you still have to have an amplifier and a cable and a tuner and you want some pedals maybe when you get a little better, and da da da, and everything's all of a sudden another $200, and you just have to kind of. And if you're a parent, I guess a lot of times the idea is to have the nice guitar in the closet waiting for when they've figured out how to play this junkier one. Some have argued that doesn't always work out. Start them off on the better one, so at least it's not a challenge to play the thing. That's fairly true. Depends on how junky it is, how much is falling apart, but it also depends on your budget. So, yeah, but you can get a decent guitar for a couple $100. That's and if you had to get an acoustic guitar that works, you can probably still get one for $70 or $90. That's not the biggest problem. When I used to work in the retail, and a lot of kids would say they wanted to learn the drums, and then the parents would come in with them into the store, and then they'd see the intro price, they'd get the sticker shock, and then they'd run straight to the guitar section to get the Fender starter pack, because that was only $300, whereas the drum kit was going to be $1,000. But over time, that guitar actually, as soon as you need an amplifier that can play loud enough with drums, you're back up to $1,000. So they really weren't going to end up saving that much money if the kid sticks with it. And really, it kind of stinks to force. Like I said, I didn't mind having a kid who had to learn the drums first before the guitar, because I think musicians should understand the other instruments anyway. But if you really, really, really want to learn this one, it shouldn't be like, no, we're never ever going to, try and help you do that. Um, yeah, I got a text back from one of the other video guys. He says, as someone who used to also give lessons, I 100% agree with not wanting younger students when I was doing that. For every one excited child, who took it seriously, there were 20 who were, forced there or wanted nothing to do with, the work to properly learn. They would get bored. Um, Again, like I try to find music that they like if possible. Like I had one gal who only wanted to learn Avril Lavigne, but even in the Avril Lavigne songbook, there was only like three kind of simple songs that she could really learn. After a month or two, it was kind of like, no, we really have to go, do Hotel California first, and that kind of thing. Um, yeah, I had I like to give an hour lesson instead of a half hour lesson. That was another problem I had when I was teaching at a music school, was that I didn't have time to discuss much with the student after the kind of lesson part of the lesson, because the next student was already there. So it was kind of like, okay, we'll learn it and go do it, and I'll see you next week. And so I didn't get to bond with them the same way either. So if he came in a bad mood, I didn't have time to unpack all of that. It was kind of like, well, show me you can play this song, and then we'll do another song, and then okay, bye. So it was a little harder being so regimented, but and then the music school took their cut, so I was really not making much more than my gas money at that point anyway. Um, but it was like once a week on a Saturday, so it was kind of like cram them in, teach them what you can, drive home. um, One thing, oh yes, as far as recording. Now, if you're a more advanced student and you're trying to start recording and you're playing, not necessarily in a group, but either with a group or not with a group, and you're doing music track by track instead of recording live, you have to kind of learn to play ahead of the beat, the drum beat. So if the drums are already laid down, you have to kind of be ahead of them, or the whole track, everything that lays on top of it will start to turn into a kind of a mushy echo, and everything won't be on the click or whatever. That's so again, coming back to timing, it's not just drummers who have to know their timing. Like if you're the guitar player and you know the song, you still don't know if you really know the song until you've recorded the song. That's then you find out, oh, okay, I'm not sharp here. I'm taking my time switching these chords and it's not matching up, that kind of thing. I guess that will have to do it for today's really long rant that I tried to record before, and yeah, went way longer than I thought it would. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the comments, and I'll see you next time.